Dr. Eisenstein is a best-selling author. He's a very well-respected lawyer, medical doctor. He's treated well over 75,000 children, parents, and grandparents. He's done studies. And he heads up homefirst.com. He's got clinics. I think they're all over Illinois, aren't they, Doc? And you're here giving people numbers, but I live and sleep and breathe media. I see all the stuff you're talking about. I mean, the big pharma knows the vaccines are reducing immunity. They know they're making people get sick. They know they're creating deadly strains, just like overuse of antibiotics. And their answer to our awakening is, okay, we're going to make you. But please continue with that quote you were giving us and tell us again where that came from.
Well, you're talking about here. There's a quote in the journal Vaccine, and it says, a new article in Vaccine sheds light on the online practices of such groups. The global anti-vaccination movement, which is a loose coalition of rogue scientists, so I may fall in that category, journalists, there you are, parents and celebrities who think that vaccines cause disease like autism, a claim that has been thoroughly discredited by modern science. Now let me tell you what's interesting even about their quote. Going to law school ruins you because you look at every word. Thoroughly discredited. Well, discredited doesn't mean anything. Even their own writing doesn't make any sense. It should be thoroughly disproven, but they don't use the word disproven because they know that's not true. It's been discredited, just like the earth was flat was discredited, and people were hung because of those beliefs, But one more important thing, because a lot of the people listening, Alex, a lot of parents, grandparents, don't want to vaccinate. And many of them have school-age children or high school students or college students. And they've always asked me, what is the best way for me to avoid vaccines? And I put up a map here. And this map of the United States, there's 18 states left. They're green. In Texas, you're in a green state. It has nothing to do with the nonsense of green our jobs. It has to do with they allow a philosophical exemption for vaccines. And if you take a look, every state except Mississippi and West Virginia allow for a religious exemption. So those two states you can't live in. I recommend, and it's in my book, Don't Vaccinate Before You Educate. And I also am going to have a webinar this Sunday evening. And just go to my webpage, homefirst.com, click on the webinar link, and just sign up. It's complimentary. Just all you have to do is put your email address in. And I recommend, if you don't want to vaccinate your children, don't give a philosophical exemption. What does that mean? A philosophical exemption is you don't have to give. I don't believe in vaccines. I don't want to do that. 18 states, including Texas, allows that. Because if you move from Texas to, let's say, Montana or Wyoming or Illinois, they don't allow for that exemption. And if the state legislature can overturn it. But it's still pretty hard to overturn the Constitution, although I thought our president's trying very hard.
Yeah, let's be clear. They've introduced this exemption stuff because they know their so-called law is just really a regulation to attend school, and they kind of trick people into the exemption process itself. I know that I haven't even done the exemption process. They can just go jump in the lake, fly a kite, and go to a very warm place.
Exactly. But if you have to hand in anything, only hand in a religious exemption that still has protection from the First Amendment. Don't ever hand in a personal belief exemption. And I'll be happy to help anyone who needs some help with that.
You're right. That's much stronger First Amendment. But what if the tyrants do nationwide what they do in the Bellwether, California doctor and lawyer, Eisenstein? What do we do, counselor, as they export this everywhere? And a child can't buy alcohol, can't have sex, even if they want to when they're 12, because they're not an adult. It's statutory rape. Right. It's contributing to the delinquency of a minor. How does California say then, we're going to brainwash your kid, we're going to shoot them up when they're 12 and not even tell you? I mean, that is outrageous.
It's absolutely outrageous, and the bottom line is you just have to say no. You may have to keep your children out of school. You may have to homeschool your children, which many of my patients do. You may have to send them to a religious school, a small religious school, which will help you avoid vaccines. Look, let me tell you something. It's getting harder and harder, but you have to stop going to doctors. So go to chiropractors, homeopaths, naturopaths, doctors who have had very strong history of being not only against vaccines, but taking a strong look at the dangers of all the pharmaceuticals.
All right, Doc, we got a long segment coming up. I got a lot of questions for you and any points you want to make. You really are one of the most informed people on this subject, but I mean, this is getting to an insane point here. You were continuing there when we hit that last break, getting into a piece of news, sir. Go ahead.
But I can tell you what's even more important is I'm listening to what you're saying, Alex. You've had a tremendous impact. Look what happened in 2009. In spite of millions and millions of dollars of advertising how dangerous the swine flu is going to be, the majority of Americans rejected it, even though it was being given free. How much more can you say than that? And one other statistic that came out in 2010, the death rate from flu in the 2009-2010 year was lower than any time in the last 10 years. The only thing uniquely different was no one had a flu vaccine that year, or at least 75 or 80% of the country didn't. How incredible is that? So obviously the message is getting out, and that's what's exciting. I still have great faith in this country, and my dad always said, my dad was from Russia. He escaped Hitler by going to China, and I was actually born today, 66 years ago, in China.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you. He met my mom there, and he always used to say, the greatest thing about America is, no matter how bad things are, I pray that it continues like that. We did eventually get rid of some politicians. Other ones come in, they're all the same. But the bottom line is that we can live here. And boy, I don't know what my dad would say today, because it's getting more frightening and more frightening.
Well, that's what I was about to say. Before, we always had corrupt politicians. We always had, bad politicians. It was a mix. But now with this whole homeland system and this corporate bureaucracy,
it's evil.
Yeah, where they actually run everything, and then the politicians are just window dressing. It's creepy.
It's very creepy. I mean, it used to be this expression is what you can explain to incompetence, you don't explain by malice. But unfortunately, malice is the bigger word. And I wonder what the president meant, although I don't think he means too much. I mean, this is not a very smart man. I wish they would stop saying how smart he is, because, he does have an agenda, but here's the statement. I will not back down from protecting our kids from mercury pollution. Is he talking about the light bulbs that he just mandated, that if they break, he's going to go in the house and grab the kids before the mercury escapes from those twisty light bulbs? I don't know. Just, very frightening.
Yeah, it says you got to call a top-level hazmat team if one of those little things breaks. Or is he talking about the vaccines they're injecting everybody with? What did you think 10 years ago of the hoax, where parents would call, and I saw it on the news saying, it's a hoax, conspiracy theorists say there's mercury. There's never been mercury. Or they had another lie, we've taken it out. Or mercury's not bad for you. Have you seen that newscast where they actually say mercury's good for children's brains?
Absolutely. And let me tell you what's so frightening. In 2009, I with 10 other people from an organization called Mercury Free, I can't remember the exact name. We went to Atlanta and we put on hazmat suits. You should have been there. You would have loved it. And we were going to take a pretend vial of the H1N1 flu vaccine and throw it on the street, and then have our hazmat team sweep it up. We were told we'd be arrested and put in jail because the vaccine, once it's spilled, becomes a federal offense. I'm sitting there saying, you got to be kidding me. They said it was safe. I mean, and so we weren't able to do it, but we still had our hazmat team there. How frightening, how absolutely frightening is this? And let me tell you something about mercury. We have an epidemic of obesity in this country. There's no question about it. And I unfortunately was a good part of that, and I think we have some of the solutions. But the question is, what caused it? You know, look at everyone has gotten heavier, especially our children are so much heavier. One of the causes may be mercury. Even in the smallest amount, mercury disrupts your system and doesn't allow you and cause you to gain weight. And we're talking about one of the smallest effects. If you take 1 drop of mercury and throw it into a 10,000-gallon pool, the whole pool is contaminated. 1 drop.
Well, I mean, as you know, Doc, this is one of the metals, heavy metals, they've actually studied for hundreds and hundreds of years because of all the industrial disasters in England. The term mad as a hatter, because it was involved in the clothiers and in the stains, that it made people go crazy. It's connected to schizophrenia, but they never want to say that because they just want to, basically try to treat it with drugs instead of a heavy metal toxicity. And of course, some of it's genetic as well. But the point is there's different types. They know all of this, and I've seen the University of Calgary electron microscope stuff where they put other heavy metals close to mammal brains, and they only cause some electrochemical damage, but mercury in the brain causes a chain reaction and just keeps eating through the brain.
Frightening. And let me tell you, well, I want to expand for 1 minute. If someone shouldn't believe it's only mercury, because some of the vaccines don't have mercury. Many of the vaccines have ethylene glycol, antifreeze, phenol, a known carcinogenic, formaldehyde, aluminum, neomycin, streptomycin, fetal parts. Don't get too hung up on mercury, because they'll say, oh, we'll take it out. And you still have all the other toxins, and even more. Aluminum may be as toxic as mercury, and if you take the mercury out, in order to keep the vaccine stable, they have to put aluminum in. Just absolutely frightening.
Well, that's like Dr. Blaylock says, it's an incredible adjuvant and supercharges everything and intensifies it. That's what he says his research shows it does.
And then Dr. Blaylock, if anyone doesn't know, is a neurosurgeon, one of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life, as far as that goes. I'm going to be talking about this, Alex, Sunday night. It's a complimentary webinar. You can go on our website, homefirst.com, hit webinar and just sign up for it. It'll be archived. I'll show about 200 slides on this. And also, I will answer questions about how to legally avoid vaccines to the best of our ability. The best way is to listen to Alex. Because
no. This is invaluable, saving lives here, Dr. Eisenstein. And, I'd like to welcome you back in a month or so, as it's been too long, and perhaps we could do a shorter webinar, and I could actually sit here and shut up some and have you go over some of those slides and points here on the radio with us as well.
I'd be absolutely honored to. It'd be my pleasure, my honor.
Well, folks need to go to homefirst.com and find out about that webinar, the books, all the material. You've done an incredible job. And again, we're starting to turn the tide. People are waking up. In fact, I've seen studies, Doc, can you speak to this briefly, where they were bemoaning in Northern California that in the per capita highest educated county in the state, they have the lowest vaccination level. Something only like 35% were vaccinating their children. And that all over the country, the more highly educated, the more people aren't vaccinating. Now, what does that tell the establishment? That the facts are there, the worm is turned, and now they're going to try to force us to take vaccines when their own vaccines, as you pointed out, are causing the whooping cough epidemic. And people like Dr. Dean Adele, I've heard him say, arrest people that don't vaccinate. They're endangering the rest of us. Well, wait a minute. If you've had the shot, Dean, and you take every new dangerous experimental shot that comes out, you should be protected then. Why can't I make them?
Right, exactly. Why are you worried? But you know why it's only in the so-called, quote, rich? It's because the poor people aren't allowed to get their food stamps, aren't allowed to have their Medicaid benefits unless they vaccinate. They tie the two together. And so I've talked to many, many poor people. They say, God, if we could avoid it, we would avoid it also.
Yeah, so it's like a firing squad. I mean, that is eugenics. Get them under your control and then medicalize them with this. And, when this all completely comes out, and it is coming out, but, I mean, look at Rick Perry destroyed by the Gardasil situation. I told him at the time it was going to destroy him.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, Rick Perry just didn't understand the issue, or he was too tied in with Merck. I'm not sure which one, Well,
he bought off. I mean, they bought off almost the entire legislature. But I mean, my point to you is, and I want your take on this in closing, Dr. Eisenstein, imagine as all of this, more and more of this comes out, all the people that have fought for vaccines, all the doctors that have endorsed it and written articles in the newspapers, and the criminals that knew at the top what this was really doing, they need to be brought to justice, because this is very similar to the medical tyranny we saw in Nazi Germany. And it's not enough to just defeat these people. When it all comes out, I want to see them go to prison.
I absolutely agree with you, because, there's no excuse. The legal principle is knew or should have known. That's the standard a doctor is held to when it comes to malpractice. And criminal, the same thing. Knew or should have known. It's embarrassing that the smartest people in our society, doctors, and I'm not patting myself on the back as much, we are the most read, do not spend the time to sit and study and do the research. There's so much evidence there. Just look at some of the graphs. I mean, what else? Explain that, unbelievable. I agree with you. They have to come to justice.